During our lives, we tend to encounter things we don't understand. We need help in understanding these mysteries, but where can you find help? Enter the cryptozoologist, UFO researcher, psychic, ghost hunters, all there to make sense of it all and help us understand. But beware, there is no regulation and no amount of education or professional licensing required. This film takes a look at how these people establish themselves as experts and why their faithful follow them like sheep to the inevitable fleecing.
Everyone wants to be something. We want to feel valued and validated. 30 years ago, you couldn't just make up something and then go somewhere with it. You could make up something, but you're going to go as far as the town you live in, or maybe go to a different town and try and pawn yourself off, but you're only going to have that small sect of people. Now I can reach the whole world. Show me fact-based present reality. I cannot show you a UFO. But if you have faith that there's a UFO out there and you're vulnerable, I've got you.
There's a couple of problems here. The first one is that the average person, like the average Bigfoot buff or ghost buff or whatever else, doesn't have a good background and grounding in science. And that doesn't mean that you need to, you don't need to have a PhD. You don't need to be a rocket scientist. But if you're going to investigate the world around us, whether the subject is medicine or engineering or biology or Bigfoot, you need to have some framework, some structure through which you understand and process the information.
It allowed everybody to express their views with no holds barred. There was a complete democratization of these ideas, no editors, no boundaries. And to be fair, it was just as beneficial to a skeptical and scientific viewpoint as it was to a paranormal viewpoint. Anybody could go on there and do it. However, I think that the paranormal, because the belief in those things are pretty high in the general population and people were interested in them, now they had an outlet to go and meet people who shared those same interests with them.
Who watching this can remember sitting around a campfire listening to stories of evil lurking in the woods, or haunted houses, or the perils of the unknown? Now it is as easy as picking up a tablet and going online. Anyone has access, and not everyone can deduce fact from fiction, snake oil from science. There are millions out there that perceive everything they see online as real.
It's a Wild West. It's evidence that is clearly hoaxed is offered right next to evidence that might possibly be authentic, along with anything along the continuum.
I think it's unethical. I think that they do know that they're pulling a fast one on people. The people who produce those TV shows absolutely know that they're being deceptive.
If I can say that I know something, whether it's true or not, that nobody else knows, I have this value. And then if it goes national, then I have many collective people believing in my value.
I found those shows to be really repulsive. The people who normally watch those channels expect the programming to be truthful.
That's the problem online or in any of these topics. The belief that I know more about the idea when I don't have any idea what I'm talking about. And that's the madness that you and I have been talking about. It's literally madness to sit there and especially say it to people who are at home viewing you. And this is the other thing that's not connected is they trust you, the viewer at home. They trust the person's channel. And the person that does the channel doesn't realize that what they're saying is directly connected to their character.
Speaking the truth seems like a simple thing, but truths may be viewed differently by different people. Science has clarified things that were once thought to be mystical or even non-existent. It provides us with a foundation of understanding based upon the exploration, experimentation, and sacrifice of those who sought the answers to the mysteries of their day. True science is what propels the human race forward away from myths and the traps of folklore and superstition. However, there are broad categories of junk science and their proponents that would have us believe in the world viewed only through the filters they create, discouraging and discounting real science in the process.
It's evidence that is clearly hoaxed.
So why do people distort or invent facts? What motivates them, and what feeds the behavior?
Why would I do that? Well, because I can, and because people can be had. And human behavior 101 is quite simple. We do because we can, and we keep doing if it works. And we've proven that through the theories of behavioral sciences, right? The dog salivates when it hears the bell. Humans are not far off. We have an animalistic part of that brain that if it works and it's pleasurable, we keep doing it. Why not?
They actually took some of the scientists that were interviewed for a ride, to the point where the scientists that often form the basis of some of these shows decided they were going to boycott these channels and not give them or their producers any more interviews, because there's like, we're done. We're not going to help you deceive people.
It's very difficult to take someone off of the internet for anything other than flat out, I can prove they are doing harm to someone else.
Those who choose to make a living in the realms of the paranormal face an uphill climb towards anything even resembling success. Even well-known practitioners have constant active appeals for donations to their various endeavors, be it crowdsourced projects or simple contributions on their websites. There are a few shortcuts to monetary gain, and those that exist are severely temporary in scope. But there is a cheap way to bolster one's standing in the realm, in any realm for that matter, and that is to possess an advanced credential related to whatever field you practice in. So it is very common to find people in junk science in possession of fake degrees or other documents worth less than the paper they are printed on.
Let me tell you what really bothers me about that. What bothers me about those claims is not that it reduces the value of my PhD. I don't care about that. What really bothers me about those claims is it's astonishingly easy to find out if those claims are true or not, and or if the claimed PhD is from what we call a diploma mill. And what frustrates me more than that person claiming the degree is the lack of initiative on the part of people within the Bigfoot community, UFO community, ghost community, to simply do a very simple check to find out if that claim is true.
So just how easy is it to get a fake degree? I went online and searched the term fake diploma and received 13.6 million results in under half a second. The site I chose was very sophisticated. It had prices from $59.95, a selection of valid styles available, and packages that included fake transcripts. Here are a few things I picked up from their information page. Do you make any university degree? Answer: any in the U.S. and most others that are printed in English. Question: will my diploma look like the university I choose? Answer: we always attempt to make every diploma look like the actual. I have specific courses I want on my transcripts. No problem. Question: do you keep my information? Answer: yes, unless you delete it. Congratulations! You just graduated college without spending a day in class. And you can do it without leaving footprints.
Unfortunately, when it comes to topics such as ghosts and Bigfoot and things like that, there's this widespread assumption that well, we don't need experts.
Why do most people in this business reject genuine expertise? Why do they feel experts are no longer necessary? We certainly want experts in our lives most of the time. How about medical experts? We don't want amateurs wielding a scalpel. What about hairstylists? The person who holds a pair of shears certainly needs expertise in their craft. And an expert chef is a blessing. Okay, maybe not this guy, but experts build our homes and businesses, teach in our schools and colleges, and we all certainly hope the people flying this thing are experts. Reasonable people do not dismiss the need for expertise out of hand. In the realms of paranormal topics, there is widespread disagreement with educated and experienced people who could give lots of insight into the mysteries believers study. But because these experts possibly disagree with popular paranormal theories or conclusions, those studying the phenomena don't want them around to potentially throw shade on their work.
When you began to understand the ways in which we can fool each other and the ways we can fool ourselves, you begin to see that many of the bases for the offered evidence for Bigfoot just isn't that good. My goal in paranormal research overall, whether the topic is ghost or alternative medicine or Bigfoot, what have you, is to improve the quality of research. So I said, instead of setting this up as I'm the enemy and there's warring camps, how about we approach this like we're all in this together? Like the sincere people who want to try and figure out if Bigfoot is real or not, let's all work together to improve the quality of research and standards and evidence in the field.
The truth is, there is no cooperation with anyone in anything paranormal. Fiercely independent groups dominate the spectrum of paranormal subjects, including UFO research, spirit studies, the broad pseudoscience of cryptozoology, and especially the immensely popular subject of Bigfoot. Case in point, I began my decade-long film venture into the paranormal with a trip to Maydale, Texas in 2005. Maydale is a sleepy community about 10 miles west of Rusk, and it's along the route of the Texas State Railroad, which had trestles on my host's property. It was about 40 acres of disused farmland and creek bottoms, and had a small population of deer and the occasional roadrunner. In the shorelines of the creeks, I was shown a collection of what was alleged to have been juvenile Bigfoot tracks. And under one of the trestles, I was shown what was allegedly a Bigfoot nest, with the declaration that the property was a birthing area for the creatures. After the second day, I met with my host and a couple of other group members, and, out of the blue, was shocked to learn that they had labeled me a spy. I was then asked politely to leave and informed I could not use any of my footage. So much for working together.
Really what they're doing is they are creating their identity again. They are going back to, this is what I do for a living. I go out and I try to make up things and convince people that these things are real. And if it works, then wonderful. And then I'm going to keep feeding the wolf because I want to make money. I want to have value. I want to be famous. And so I've got to have a name to go along with it. And there's nothing that says I can't make up a name. If I make it up and I say how the rules work, I become an expert in that thing.
This whole business is part of cryptozoology, which is a pseudoscience that deals with creatures, which they call cryptids, which nobody's discovered yet. The number of animals that cryptozoologists have claimed exist, and they made those claims at a time when there was, there'd never been any sign of them ever turning up. They made the prediction before they were turning up, before we had any physical evidence. The number of creatures that have been predicted to exist under those conditions by cryptozoologists, the number of them is in the hundreds. Not a single one of these animals has ever turned up anywhere in the world. Their track record is zero. Well, we keep discovering large animals that were known to science. Well, that's true, but none of them ever turn out to be animals that the cryptozoologists predicted existed, and they're always turned up and recognized for what they are by people pretty much like me, zoologists, or by people who find these things and take them to zoologists. The cryptozoologists have nothing to do with that whole business. They like to claim pandas and coelacanths and mountain gorillas and creatures like that as they were triumphs somehow or other of cryptozoology, and they bring them into the picture so that they can annex some real science to their pseudoscience.
You take away everything that I have believed makes me me. I am not going to let you do that. People will kill for self. I would say 80% of the population does not function in a space of logic. This is what I teach people all day long. Self-regulation means that I must be in a space of logic more times than I am sitting in my emotional space. Because in my emotional space, I will fall for anything.
One of the processes that's often overlooked in investigation is it's a scientific process, and it's considering alternative explanations. And so if you have an anomalous experience, if you have a weird Bigfoot photo or a blob squatch, one of the blobby things, oftentimes the believers will latch on to with absolute certainty, they'll latch onto a specific explanation. This is a Bigfoot. This is this. This is that. And my answer is always, you might be right. I don't know. I wasn't there. We don't have good hard evidence. But could it be something else? Is it possible that it's a moose? Is it possible that it's some guy in a suit? Is it? I don't know. But so my approach to investigation is always help me understand what you saw.
I think that there are lots of explanations why a person might be sure that he or she has seen something, and when they haven't. There's also false memories that people have. That there have been studies done on that. People being excited and mistaking something that isn't a Bigfoot for a Bigfoot, having experiences which the only explanation they can come up with, things that they've seen, and maybe along with some kind of movement and hearing, they interpret it as being a Bigfoot, and they don't then question at some later point as to, well, maybe it was something else. They become convinced that that's what it was, especially if they're believers in the phenomenon to begin with, and they're expecting to maybe have an experience with one. So I think that all of this is perfectly natural and explainable. One of the things that Bigfoot advocates will say is, so skeptics believe that all these people that are making these reports are hoaxers. And that's setting up a straw man. You don't have to believe that. There are hoaxers. But nonetheless, there are probably many, many people who in all honesty, truly believe that they have seen or otherwise experienced a Bigfoot.
Because, I saw it right in front of me, who are you to tell me that I didn't, right? And, honestly speaking, I have to admit that maybe they did see it. I mean, granted, I wasn't there, so I don't know that they are just crazy, or that they were hallucinating, or that they were mistaken in what they thought they saw.
Oftentimes, the believers will latch on to, with absolute certainty, they'll latch onto a specific explanation.
They don't like the rules of regular religion, so they've substituted these ideas as being a bigger view, a bigger, something bigger in the world or outside of the world that they can participate in. And a lot of New Age ideas, which focus on the person being enlightened and having an experience. I see that a lot. They're out to have a life-changing experience by having feeling like they met a ghost or encountered a ghost or a Bigfoot. It's a life-changing experience for people, just like a religious epiphany or whatever. And I see a lot of the pull-ins of New Age ideas, Native American beliefs, spiritualism, and a lot of Catholic beliefs, like the holy water, the crosses, the rosaries, the prayers before going into a haunted place, the protection rituals that they undergo, removing the spirits with sage or ritual. So they take whatever is useful from any type of spirituality and pull it into what they're doing as another method.
To illustrate the religious nature of paranormal beliefs, I'll recount an exchange I had on social media. A friend posted a video of an alleged Bigfoot interacting with a researcher. It was presented without corroborating evidence, and comments leaned towards it being authentic. When, due to certain aspects of the clip, I commented that this was probably not the real thing, a reply was made saying, quote, "With Bigfoot, anything is possible," end quote. Think about those words. With Bigfoot, anything is possible. Well, anything certainly is possible with a legend. That's why it's a legend and not proven fact. That statement implies that this mythical creature has been assigned deity-like powers and can transcend the bonds of the laws of physics and nature, just like another deity.
Because by the time you're into Bigfoot, you're already primed into thinking a certain way and you don't even know it yet. And part of that priming is a religious faith. It's a religious faith of certainty, but you have no facts for it.
The reason why people feel compelled to go into woo explanations is because nothing ever shows up in the way of physical evidence that you would expect if there were a real animal out there. It doesn't particularly bother me that they do that. Either way, I don't accept the idea that there are Bigfoots. Whether one is to take, assume that it's some sort of an actual living creature, or whether it's something that has various woo qualities to it and isn't some sort of an actual living creature, but can cloak itself and go in and out of portals and maybe has, some UFO connection and all that business. So it doesn't particularly bother me that they do that, but the reason why I think is pretty obvious.
Even if you are truly technically or academically qualified to research and speak in your field, there is yet another way to gain credibility. This is by association with certain groups or occupations. Being or claiming to be Native American is a very respected way to increase your standing instantly in the paranormal world, one I have seen many, many times with little proof of that fact. So is the association with law enforcement, the military, and religious figures. The more fundamental, the better. Association with things like these overcomes 90% of the hurdles needed to win the trust of those you seek to influence. There is also the use of affidavits. This assumes some legally proven credibility given the fact that affidavits are a legal tool, but if an affidavit is proven to be false, the person who signed it is subject to penalties under the laws of perjury. One of the earliest was the very historically significant affidavit sworn by William Rowe concerning his sighting of a female Bigfoot in 1955. In 1955, Canadian William Rowe allegedly had an encounter with a Sasquatch. This was, by his description, a 6-foot-tall, 3-foot-wide female Sasquatch. Rowe commissioned his daughter Myrtle to draw the creature. He included the drawing in a sworn affidavit he gave in Edmonton on August 26, 1957. Roger Patterson borrowed the story from the collected works of John Green. It appeared in his book, Do Abominable Snowmen of America Really Exist?, published in 1966. In that book was this illustration of Rowe's encounter. Then, in 1967, Patterson alleged another sighting of a famous female Sasquatch. Coincidence? Printed photographs began to be available to the general public around the mid-19th century. When the phrase, "the camera cannot lie," was coined, the view that a photograph was a faithful representation of a scene, in a way that a subjective painting could never be, was a reasonable one. After all, the image that falls on the photographic plate is precisely what the camera is pointing at. Phrases like photographic memory supported the view of photographs as precise and infallible records. But with a little creativity, people were able to manipulate not only the mechanical process of taking the photo, but the optical and chemical processes in producing the final print, and some of these were very, very good. Also, even an accurate depiction of what was in front of the lens wasn't necessarily a representation of the truth. Hoaxed and manipulated photos were the beginning, but this was augmented by other charlatans who grabbed people's interest under the guise of authority in the various topics. Just like the carnival barker luring people into the tent. A phenomenon that has exploded over the last decade has been the emergence of conventions or cons that are organized for virtually every type of belief imaginable. These events are usually expensive to attend and offer a variety of so-called expert speakers on topics ranging from Bigfoot to the afterlife to remote viewing, don't get me started, and beyond. Some of the larger conventions have taken on a cult-like aura, and simply being invited to speak at them is considered verification of what you're promoting. This list contains about 50 of the events I've found on the net in just a few minutes. This is big business.
If you go to any of these paranormal conferences or Bigfoot conferences or comic and fantasy conferences, they're almost all the same now. You know, you can't even tell them apart. The guy who speaks at one is going to go speak at the other, right? And there's not even a distinction anymore, whether it's Bigfoot or Chewbacca or whether it's Mothman or, Aquaman.
Unless you've been living in a cave, you may have noticed a recent surge in shows on cable depicting lots of people hunting lots of ghosts, doing battle with spirits, and cleansing houses so their horrified owners can live without fear. And that's just on one channel. This all began in the early 2000s with a couple of New Jersey plumbers who hunted ghosts part-time. That show changed the landscape of cable forever. It also gave us new ways to allegedly detect ghosts, using some existing equipment meant for other things. So there was an explosion of people, groups, and cable shows made up of do-it-yourself ghost hunters. The typical show involves a team of so-called experts going into a building or some other haunted venue at night, always at night, setting up infrared cameras, motion sensors, and a command area. They'd go from place to place, asking the spirits questions, applying nothing but proven scientific means to detect the wayward spirits.
Well, a lot of them follow what they've seen in the media, the depictions of science in the media. They go by what they see on TV and in fictional depictions of how a scientist is supposed to look, how they're supposed to act, what they're supposed to do, how they're supposed to behave, the jargon and the words that they use, their mannerisms and methods. And what I saw them doing was sort of playing pretend scientists. They were acting as if they were scientists. But, of course, the idea of science means that you've gone through the rigorous training to become a scientist and learn the methods that and the ethos of science, which is an important component. And that's the component that they're really missing, is what does it mean to actually do good science? And it's just not being systematic and careful and using gadgets and fancy words and putting ology at the end of whatever you're doing. It's more of a behavior and set of norms that you adopt and adhere to.
Okay, first let's turn the lights on. So what is this guy looking at? He's holding what is known as an EMF meter. They were designed to detect faults in electrical lines, machines, and appliances. They were never meant to detect ghosts or goblins. But because of a certain cable series, EMF meters and even Geiger counters have been given renewed purpose. Apparently, someone somewhere declared that the spirits of deceased people give off energy detectable by these meters, and the rest is history. Simply because some spirit hunters experience weird fluctuations or failures of battery power doesn't mean there is something there feeding off the energy and emitting it back into the ether. Believe me, as a lifelong photographer and videographer, if something can go wrong with a battery pack, it happened to me. And I can only blame it on poor equipment or my failure to charge something properly. EMF stands for electromagnetic field. Anything that operates electrically emits a field. Magnetic fields are used to generate power, conduct medical imaging, and are generated by the very earth we live on. So we are literally surrounded by EMF fields 24/7. They can be generated by everything from the cell phone in our pocket to commercial radio stations, police and military signals, overhead power lines, and a ton of other sources too numerous to list. Everywhere you are, so are EMF fields. Though the EMF meter and Geiger counter, along with digital voice recorders, are not the only tools these people use, they are among those that are actually created for a specific legitimate purpose. Some of the other things ghost hunters use are so-called spirit boxes that claim to allow spirits to vocalize words through their circuitry, in essence, speaking with us.
Hello!
The basic spirit box consists of an AM radio scanner which scans all broadcast bands at a selectable interval and allegedly allows the spirits to pick out and piece together words and phrases from the transmissions.
Hello!
Upgrades of the basic spirit box are constructed out of mini guitar amps, noise gate pedal circuitry, and reverb units because we all know a mock ghost voice sounds better if it is coming from a cavernous hole in the earth. As to the digital voice recorder, the Panasonic DR60 was a $20 tool that started a craze among the spirit community. The DR60 was a very low-quality 8 MHz sampling rate recorder that was designed with college students and lecture halls in mind, but the circuitry was flawed and created an internal feedback that sounded like voices that weren't there.
Hello!
So now this little gem sells for as much as $3,000 on auction sites. To get some experience with these tools, I traveled to the Redlands Hotel in Homestead, Florida. The hotel was built in 1904, making it the oldest surviving building in Homestead. The hotel management and paranormal researcher Tim Arnwine showed a high level of competence and courtesy, and I am very thankful for their participation. Now, briefly, what is this again?
This is called a portal.
Okay.
It's basically, this is called an SB7, a spirit box. And what it's doing, it's gonna sweep radio stations, AM, FMs, to cause a white light, and the theory is that the white light helps them communicate better. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna sweep, we're gonna try the rate at 200 to see. Right. And it's gonna pick up words because it's doing radio stations, but you can ask questions to it and see if they'll answer for it. Is somebody here right now? And sometimes I'll use an app that just, the apps will cut down a lot of this background noise. It's called a portal. So they give you more singular words so you can work with it all easier. Is somebody here?
The app Tim is referring to is nothing more than a database of pre-recorded words and sounds. The disclaimer on their website says, "For entertainment purposes only," in all caps.
What's your name?
Tim and I used all the various tools he brought and had no luck with any of them. I will note that during one question to the ether, one of his DR60s gave a response of sorts, but the other two running simultaneously along with my Tascam DR07 recorder and my camera had nothing. 600 plus miles and nothing to show for it.
I like my gadgets. Gadgets are nice because when I have gadgets, it makes me feel like I'm doing something that's important. And this goes to what's called the Parkinson's law of triviality, where the idea becomes more important than what the topic is. So as long as I'm doing all these things and feeling all this stuff, that makes me feel that I'm onto something. But the problem is you're not finding what the topic is.
To me, the whole black shirt brigade, they're all in matching shirts. They're all standing in the same way. They're trying to look tough. That image is a couple of things. They're trying to look professional. They're trying to look serious, very serious, and no nonsense. They're not out to just have a good thrill. They're there to actually do a job. So they're like your metaphysical handyman coming to your house, and they're going to fix your problem. There is this thread of this workmanlike ethos, that just because the ghost hunters were plumbers and, they were just everyday guys and at night they fought ghosts. So there is that idea of that, just, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the hands-on mechanical, we can come and we can do it. They're brave, they're courageous, they're going to go in there, they're going to go where you're afraid to go, even though sometimes they're very afraid to do it. And they're often very afraid of things like spiders and bugs and things like that, but they're not afraid of ghosts.
So, the Black Shirt Brigades march forth into old mansions, down electrified hallways, up those creepy staircases and into the basements, routing out the offending ghosts and the occasional demon, all so the little children can sleep safely in their beds. Good job.
A cabin!
It's like role playing. I guess they call it LARPing, the live action role playing. Like down the hill here, every year we have the medieval festival where everyone dresses up like they're, some character out of the Middle Ages. And so, that's a fun thing to do when you're out in the woods camping. It's nice to have something like that takes us out of the city, out from our houses to a place where we might contact the natural world, right? So there's nothing so strange about people in the Bigfoot world wanting to do that.
I look at some of the shows that, like you said, and this feuding, again, these are all mini cultures, mini little tribes that start formulating concepts, and they get together as groups and they start bonding as groups, and it starts to become an internal culture, just like the Bigfoot community in Western culture is only a 50-year-old culture. It's not like the Christian culture has been around for 2,000 years. It's only 50 years, so it's a good system to study. But when you are looking at some of these TV shows, there was this one, I think it's called Hunting Monsters or something like that. You can help me with that one. But, you got all these guys that are loaded to bear, and they're all walking around looking really important and stuff, right? But you put them in a crisis situation, you got 10 of them with automatic weapons, and they're not in a cohesion unit like it would be in the military, but they've all been in the military, but no one's the leader. Then you got problems as soon as some major crisis hits. And that's the scary part about it, is you have people who are unqualified, which you hammer at all the time, which is important to do that. I don't think you should let them off the hook, because at one point someone's going to either get killed or someone's going to get murdered out here. And because they don't know these people. And the problem with us is when you're gullible, gullibility comes into the person's body as from their perspective as this, they're trustworthy, trusting. And they have this game plays a bit on the brain a bit. If they're trusting, then they're not going to get hurt.
Robert Stebbins, that serious leisure was his idea, and I think he published that in 1992. And like a couple things around that, he did a paper and then he did 2 books. They're so serious about it that it becomes part of their life's work, and that's how they end up defining themselves and part of their identity. And they identify themselves as now with that leisure activity instead of in the past where we would define ourselves by our normal career. So maybe these people who are serious about paranormal investigation don't have the most fulfilling jobs in life, so they're looking for a way to actually contribute to society in another way.
We have a desire for supernatural. It does seem that our human nature is drawn for supernatural. We tend to want to know more from a supernatural standpoint. It does seem to be a desire for something that is outside of normal, outside of what we consider normal. So supernatural is something that gets people very drawn to things, to believe something that it may not necessarily be true. And emotional reasoning, I think it's a very big factor. We tend to believe that our reasoning plays a role in what we believe sometimes. However, we, as a psychologist, I always see that sometimes rationality is overridden by emotional reasoning, something that it's stirring our emotions. powerfully gets to override that rationality of things.
A worldview is a framework. Everybody has one. It's sort of like a puzzle, and as you go through life, you have experiences or you learn things, and you put another piece into the puzzle, and it forms this picture, and that's your worldview. And a worldview is very difficult to overturn entirely. Sometimes you have to dismantle it piece by piece and replace the pieces. People have different types of worldviews. Some people have a religious worldview where they see everything in terms of a religious experience. And some people have a logical, analytical, or scientific worldview, and they see things in terms of that. And then there are people who have a paranormal worldview or a supernatural worldview, which has less rules than the rest of us have. If you have a paranormal worldview, you think that there are things out there that we haven't yet discovered, that the laws of physics aren't quite right, that they could be bent, that we don't know everything, that there's unknown things that are going to come into the realm of the known, and their rules are more flexible. If you have a supernatural or religious worldview, all the rules are out the window, and there's no rules. Anything can happen. You know, nature can be turned upside down, and that's okay. So the idea of a paranormal worldview is the way they go through life. They see things, and it falls right into that framework. So if they have something strange happen to them, they will have a tendency to interpret it much differently than someone like me, who doesn't have a paranormal worldview, will interpret that.
So they tend to cling to something that, even though it's not true, they tend to cling towards it. And once they cling towards it, no matter what you are going to present to them, they will reject. So they are trying to find materials or expertise that will going to prove that what they believe in the first place is the right belief. So confirmation bias, I believe, is playing a very important role into believing that something that, even though we have research to prove that's not the way it is, they reject it because of this confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that only confirms or supports one's beliefs or values. People tend to unconsciously select information that supports their views, dismissing that which does not. They also tend to interpret ambiguous evidence, such as things that could either confirm or disprove their views, as only supporting their position. This effect is strongest for desired outcomes, for emotionally charged issues, and deeply entrenched beliefs. The possibility of changing the believer's minds, however, is slim, even in the face of compelling evidence. Something that often accompanies confirmation bias is a syndrome called the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias in which people with low ability at a task overestimate their ability. It is related to the cognitive bias as it is an illusion of superiority and comes from people's inability to recognize their lack of ability or knowledge of any given topic. So in a nutshell, people experiencing this are not educated enough in the topic to know they are not educated enough. It is a self-perpetuating condition that often leads to the claim, I don't need experts, I know what I'm doing.
You know, there is no research on, to prove certain things, but people, if they want to believe certain things, they are not going to go to the extent and open their mind to see emotional reasoning or cognitive bias may play a role into this. Definitely, I believe that the solution, in a way, as per se a solution, will be to open our minds to the extent of doing our own research and finding out what's going on, and not just allow somebody else to feed us.
To illustrate my point about the danger of confirmation bias, I'll use the outrageous allegation of a Sasquatch massacre promulgated by a noted proponent of the Patterson-Gimlin film of 1967. This theory asserts that not only did Roger Patterson film a real Sasquatch, but what the camera didn't show was a horrific slaughter of a family of the creatures. The footage we are looking at now has been termed the tracking dog footage, or Blue Creek Mountain footage, and was used as proof in formulating the theory of the massacre. It asserts that the men seen here, plus the camera operator, shot a family of Sasquatch because a bounty was offered by the logging company operating in the area. But Blue Creek Mountain was at least 40 miles from where Patterson filmed his Sasquatch. The theory alleges that this frame shows blood on the ground and a Sasquatch hide and body in a bloody pool of water. As you can see, there is no red coloration present. The images used by the person formulating the theory were magenta shifted due to their age, film type, poor processing, and archiving. This frame is alleged to show the dog barking and charging at a dead Sasquatch. In reality, the dog is barking at a guy in the shade and just being playful. If you think all of this is harmless, this theory led to people being publicly accused of murder. It also implicated a famous individual in the entertainment industry and his associates. All of this came about because someone saw something, believed it to be something it wasn't, and resisted all efforts others made to show him the truth. This is not only a perfect example of confirmation bias, but of the Dunning-Kruger effect. The person responsible for this theory literally didn't know what they were talking about.
There's crazy people out there. I've dealt with crazy people. I've dealt with dangerously crazy people. I've dealt with people meaning well. This is the other thing that falls into the category. When I'm sincere about what I believe about this topic or any other topic, my interpretation of being sincere means that I'm honest and I'm not going to hurt anybody. Sincerity is not a good one to go with to protect that. Because you could do sincerely stupid decisions convincing people of those decisions, and it harms those other people. It's not that we're going after anybody. What we're trying to do is also use the system of these paranormal events and Bigfoot community and all that kind of stuff to assist people, to help them become self-aware of, don't take this stuff hook, line, and sinker. You have a right to actually challenge people.
It's almost like people want to live in this fantasy world rather than the real world. And, if you're a critical thinker, they will criticize you for being closed-minded, as if believing in fairy tales and monsters is somehow being open-minded. To me, being truly open-minded is to study the way reality really is and to learn about it, which is so infinitely fascinating and complicated that we don't need mystical monsters. We don't need superpowers and magic. What we need is self-discipline and learning.
This is the Reed Polygraph, a lie detector. An estimated 200,000 persons have staked their futures, many of them their lives, on this machine.
Okay, I'm not advocating that everyone is lying. My beef is with those who willingly and knowingly fabricate things and profit from them. It's those people I want to see strapped into the hot seat and grilled.
This is the moment. The tense, the anxious moment. A man's future is at stake. Is it true? Is it a lie?
Are you wearing glasses now?
Maybe we ought to ask him something a little more to the point, like, do you know Miss Anthony?
Do you know Miss Anthony? Who?
The truth is that there is no absolute way to sort out the liars from the truthful. One of the things I struggle with is the overpowering sense of honesty I get from some of these witnesses. This man, James Jenkins of Monroe, Louisiana, impressed me as honest right through to his core. He was a big guy, unpretentious, humble, and literally endured 2 days of shooting while he guided me through the back roads of neighboring White, Arkansas, crouched uncomfortably in the passenger seat of my old Jeep Cherokee. I have no doubt whatsoever that he saw something, and that the things that he saw were common in the wilds of northern Louisiana and southern Arkansas.
That thing come out, flying just about as tall as them pine trees are right there. We could see it coming through the woods there, coming down through yonder. It come right on out to here, see? It come right through here and went right down through there. And we were standing in between them two poles right there, okay? All right, it come on down and it just lit the whole area here up, Everything just lit up, just as bright as it could be. Of course, we were awestruck and made a U, a circle, and come down around the woods yonder and come back down this way here and went back to yonder. But the lights were real huge on there. And I never, Ronnie and I never heard a sound. Not a sound, no sound whatsoever. And I mean, these lights were steady surging. Just doing like this right here. This is slow, just moving back and forth, just like this right here. I mean, just as graceful as they could be, you know. And it went right on down and back right down through the woods over yonder.
One of the processes that's often overlooked in investigation is it's a scientific process, and it's considering alternative explanations. My approach to investigation is always help me understand what you saw.
Although Mr. Jenkins seems to be truthful, let me point out a couple of things. One, he is speaking from recollection instead of photos or video, and two, he does not offer a date or even the availability of the other witnesses. Does this mean he is lying? No, it simply means that this report is nearly impossible to verify or investigate.
What I'm always looking for when I'm interviewing people I'm most interested in the people who I sincerely believe in their claims. That those are the people that interest me, because I'm interested in belief. I'm interested in people who genuinely believe they've seen a ghost or a demon or a UFO or a Sasquatch. Sincerity doesn't mean that their claims are true. I hope I'm being clear about the difference.
The trouble with reports of this type is they make up more than 90% of any given UFO research reporting page. These are presented as evidence but do not meet any scientific criteria. This is only hearsay, and accepting this as evidence is wrong. I am not calling Mr. Jenkins a liar, but if any researcher accepts this type of unsubstantiated report as proof, then their research is fatally flawed and their efforts doomed to failure. Those in business to bolster their standing or make money are quick to spread and embellish these reports for personal and professional gain. And a disclaimer on the report page putting the responsibility of belief on the reader, stating the site is immune, is like sending a bowl of candy out in a preschool and blaming the kids for eating it.
The researchers go out and they find stick arrangements which they don't think are natural or couldn't have been made by humans. Or they find broken branches which for one reason or another they think had to have been broken by a Bigfoot. Or they find tracks which could have been made by hoaxers, not the people who find them. Or they find tracks that are of bears or something like that, which they misinterpret. And so they believe that anyone who doesn't accept the truth of the existence of Bigfoot is deluded, because clearly all of this evidence points that such a thing does exist. Now, these people have come up with all kinds of special pleading excuses for why we don't have any physical evidence. They will say, well, we've only been looking for Bigfoots for, a little over 50 years since the Patterson-Gimlin film. And they, as if the only people who can find evidence of Bigfoots would be the people who are out looking for Bigfoots. And as if people haven't been collecting animals and hunting animals and that sort of thing for about 500 years. We had this people in North America 500 years ago when people from Europe came over here. We had explorers, we had settlers, we had missionaries, we had trappers, we had prospectors, we had military campaigners, loggers, hunters have spent time in the wilderness. And the amount of time that any one of these groups, even field biologists, have put in over the years compared to the time that has been put in by Bigfooters, I mean, it isn't just a drop in the bucket, it's molecules in the bucket. Real animals are discovered, big ones, pretty much as soon as people get into the area that they live in. And by people, I generally mean people that are maybe scientists and that sort of thing. And if you know where they live, the big animals that have been discovered that weren't previously known, as soon as they became known, people knew where they lived, and then they would go there and they would catch them and put them in zoos, and they would shoot them and make trophies out of them and collect them as scientific specimens. If you know where they are because somebody's found them there and demonstrated their existence, then you can go there and you can find them. This does not happen with Bigfoots. Real animals have fossils. Real animals have their heads in many, many bars in the United States up on the wall, of heads on the walls of restaurants and places like that of real animals. And rugs are made out of them too. You find their bones in the woods. You find their bones in museums. You find the dead animals. They're there. I'm in the business of finding animals, including new species of animals, for museums. I've been doing it for decades, and again, all over the world. And I know something about the business. Finding new species of big animals is not all that unusual. Some years ago, I discovered that there were about 3 new species of large mammals discovered per decade. So big animals are being discovered all the time, but they're not being discovered by cryptozoologists. And once they're discovered, you know where they are, you go there, and there they are. But in the United States, we have lots and lots of places that are supposed to be full of Bigfoots. But if you go there, they're not there. You can't find them. Why is that? It's because they don't exist.
A cabin!
A dead man in a huge web.